Okay, Fernando, I'll read you in the chat, so don't worry. Okay, so now we are going to go over this concept. And like I said, Fernanda, you can type your answer, and Julian and Adriana, like I was mentioning, what do you think about autonomy in language learning? What is your take?
Okay, well, I think autonomy in language learning is the students' ability and possibility to manage the way they organize the learning process. For me, it's not about they choosing the topics they learn, at least not at the beginning, but how they organize their learning process, whether it is the learning strategies they use, how they practice, when, where, how they focus their learning, what are they using it for, what are the specific purposes or learning outcomes they want to get from learning another language, and the ability of them to organize and focus on that is autonomy.
Okay, thank you very much. How about you, Julian David? What is your take? Julian, can you hear me?
Here right now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So it's not so far from my partner was mentioning it. I really agree about that. I consider that is the capacity of students to maybe set their own goals, to select the strategies, maybe to self-monitoring. I mean, the process, the self-evaluation, and it's a way to maybe have that independence from that process.
Okay, thank you very much. And Fernando wrote on the chat, autonomy is the ability to develop the learning process through environments beyond the classroom. Okay, so we have been reading about autonomy and what it is in our context. So some of the definitions that we have read and that we have seen have mentioned that, first of all, it has to do a lot with the self-control on how the students can manage their own learning, and also how it aligns with their interest. The freedom that we relate in autonomy, it's that freedom that allows the students to align to their interests and their personal objectives. And it does not necessarily mean that they're going to be learning alone. It just gives them the freedom to choose, depending on what it is their target. So when we do autonomy or self-study, self-learning, um, true autonomy, we need to always keep in mind that true autonomy means to evaluate critically our own progress, identify identifying our personal needs, and selecting appropriate materials or strategies that we are going to go ahead, and that is the first route that we are going to take towards attaining this autonomy. So when we talk about autonomy, do we think that is it an independent process? Is it an interdependent process? What do you think?
That was part of one of the statements we had in the first part of the activity. After reading all the articles, I think it starts as an interdependent process and it moves toward an independent process. I mean, that's like the goal, or what we're moving forward with modeling autonomy to our students. It starts at interdependent because autonomy is not something we are born with. It's something that we learn through modeling and example and practice. And in this case, in our context, students acquire such autonomy by working with us and interacting with us teachers and their peers. So it starts as interdependent, but once they have internalized those strategies, and they are able to apply what autonomy means, like all the aspects that you mentioned before, then it becomes an independent process where they are able to apply it by themselves in their own learning process.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well said. So the mediator, the professor, is this guide that will allow the students to to guide towards those teaching or learning strategies that could help him or her in the process. However, when we are doing an interdependent process, it is important to have present that the professor, the mediator, does not leave the student alone. At the beginning, we are very present, and the goal is, as Adriana said, to eventually have the student um, comply and do it by his and take on the responsibility and take the correct decisions, right? But we do need collaboration to be able to mutually support each other and develop those abilities. Okay, so I'm going to give you this one question, and I would like to hear with the first question that we had from the guide, the first statement. If autonomy is related to freedom, then learners can choose what they want to learn during the language learning process and under the didactic methodologies they prefer. So, Julian, what do you think? Based on what you've read and what you've seen, what is your point of view in this first question?
Okay, so I agree with that because I remember that I have watched sometime a video in which professor said that imagine that you're in a cafeteria and actually students need maybe a tire to that they can choose by themselves, not maybe when they have like a few things to select, but they have a variety of it. They are going to be more tired to that, and maybe they will try to select the things that they are interested in. So I consider that I agree with that.
Okay, very good. And you, Adriana?
Well, I think I partially agree. I do consider that in the beginning of the process of learning a foreign language, students need to have a basic knowledge of some elements like grammar, vocabulary, so they're able to communicate and express their ideas with this language. And that part of the process is not something that they can choose freely. I mean, that's knowledge that should be the same for everybody. I remember that in his article, Benson mentions this part, and he supports this statement. He says that at the beginning of the process, students need to have a common knowledge, or like a common basis. But beyond that point, that's when autonomy and freedom come, and then they are able to direct their learning towards the goals they have. For example, I think I connected with the my working context. I thought in some institutes, and at the beginning we need to give them the basics of the language, but once they are able to communicate, then we start focusing their skills on what they actually need for, whether they're about to travel to another country, whether they are needed for work, whether they are I don't know, pilots, and they need to communicate in their working environment. That's when it becomes independent, and that's when freedom comes. That's the part where they are able to um, direct their own process, choose what are those learning outcomes they want to achieve and how they want to direct it. I do agree with the last part of the statement where it says that they can choose the didactic methodologies they prefer. I do agree with students um, having an active role on choosing how they learn, what are the learning styles they like and they feel more comfortable with, the type of activities that they actually learn with, because not everybody learns the same way. But yeah, I think that's my opinion on that one.
Okay, thank you. Well done, you guys. So, according to Dickinson, an autonomous learner is able to formulate his own learning objectives in collaboration with his teacher and also implementing specific strategies to attain a particular goal. Therefore, although autonomy is closely related to freedom, it's not I'm free to choose whatever I want, but rather I need some guidance to get to the point to where I can choose freely from what I know is going to take me to a particular learning objective. So I believe that although, freedom is part of autonomy, learners should use said autonomy in benefit to their own learning process. So if I don't choose correctly what I'm going to work on, or if my students don't choose correctly, then their autonomy will become a burden and not a freedom as such. And Fernando, would you give me your last name, please? Because I only see here Fernando and I don't see your last name. I appreciate it. Another question that we had here is the second one. When a learner reads by him or herself and reviews topics without any help from anyone else, it means that he or she has thoroughly achieved autonomy. What do you think, Julian? The second question that we have.
All right. So regarding that, what we're talking right now, and yes, I totally agree with my partner said before, because I maybe didn't mention that, but yes, that's specifically not at the beginning, because at the beginning it's going to be difficult for them to pick or select what they want. But I agree with that, because when they are maybe free or they follow their own process, we can talk about autonomy. They are maybe trying to do what they consider that is going to be good for achieving their own goals, or maybe to have the way they want to learn. And it's going to be, yes, a kind of autonomy. They are going to be like monitoring their own process.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. What do you have to say, Adriana?
Okay, regarding the second statement, I think it is an example of independent work, but not it does not necessarily mean that the student is autonomous or that he or she has reached autonomy. I'm reading Fernando's comment in the chat where he says that the ability to direct one's own learning includes setting goals, deciding on content, and evaluating what has been learned. It is not just reviewing topics. I totally agree with you, Fernando. The fact that students are able or are motivated to read by themselves or to research some questions or the topics that they are interested in is just a part of what autonomy is, or an evidence, but it does not necessarily mean that they are doing everything that implies being autonomous. But because what if they're reading but they are not evaluating their own process? What if they are not self-reflecting on what they're doing? What if they are not connecting all of those with their own learning outcomes, but just reading? I mean, it has a
Right.
whole process behind it.
Correct. So I think we all agree when we say that, while self-study is a key component, it is a key component, true autonomy involves more than just independent work. It includes the ability to critically evaluate their own progress. So when we think of students, when we all think as because we are autonomous, we are working on that autonomy. You are studying in a master's program that is, virtual. So you guys are working constantly on this particular autonomy. We are getting there. We need to critically evaluate their progress, identify the needs, and select appropriate resources. It's not a random act. It needs to be with direction and purpose, right? So, and also, when we want to regulate our learning, we need to monitor the progress, reflect on the strategies, and adjust the techniques that fit my need as a learner. So the teacher or the professor, his assistants, giving guidance, giving strategies, giving feedback is very good, but it's not a requisite. It is the student can auto-regulate and can also need the orientation from a professor. So it's not like the student will be completely alone, as autonomy might seem to some people, but rather is thinking about those very specific steps that we need to take to get there, to be able to develop this skill. So there was another question that says that autonomy is a skill that is developed outside the classroom with the learner's independence, but is reflected in his or her performance in the classroom. So when we talk about the classroom, we talk about a learning space. I don't like to refer to classroom as walls and roof and whatnot, but we just refer to the classroom as a learning space, whatever it may be. In this case, this is our learning space. So when this is developing outside the classroom, it shows inside the classroom. Do you agree with that?
Well, not exactly. As we were talking before, autonomy um, emerges with the interaction of the teacher. So it cannot start outside the classroom. It can be reinforced, and students can internalize what they are learning in the classroom outside of it. But the whole process starts within the classroom with the interaction with the teacher, with the models that you give me, the examples that we get from the teacher, the strategies they use, and then we as the students we take that and we use it outside of it to practice, to monitor our process, to complement our learning. And of course it is reflected on our performance, but it does not start outside, it starts inside, and then we can use it outside of it.
Okay, very well. What about you? Let me read Fernando. It says, Holex views autonomy as a potential capacity that must be developed, not something that simply exists outside the classroom. Completely accurate. And teachers need to encourage students to develop the autonomy they already possess. When we think about our students already possessing something, that is something that we constantly need to keep in mind. No student is an empty bag. All students have previous knowledge, and we need to acknowledge that. When we do so, we are helping them towards this way of being autonomous. So teachers can foster autonomy by teaching students specific learning strategies within the classroom. The case of Harry illustrates that autonomy can be restricted by the course's goals and practices, showing that the classroom environment is a powerful influence. Okay, good job. Thank you, Fernando. And Julian, you're typing something there. Or would you like to rather speak?
Okay, yes. Yeah, I agree. I mean, that is a kind of freedom that they have, but they are like through experiences and actions outside the classroom. But yes, they're going to reflect inside our classroom, and obviously they're going to need the teacher just to guide it in order to maybe create that critical thinking that we need to look for to develop in them.
Sorry, the mic is off. It's okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, yeah, I think we are all going towards the same direction. I noticed that you have been properly reading the references, and that is very encouraging. Remember that every time that we approach an activity, we approach any type of work, there's lots of reading that needs to be done previous to. So I always invite you to read and be able to interact with one another in case that there is a misunderstanding or something. You can also send a message. We can meet we can talk about it, because sometimes feels lonely when we are doing this type of study, and loneliness sometimes takes a toll, because sometimes when you might feel like, you don't have somebody there behind you to support you, but you do. So if at any point in time, or if at any moment there is a space where you don't understand something, or where you're doubting yourself, you can always reach out, and we can talk about it. So that is part of autonomy as well. It's not only to do everything by myself, because when we talk about autonomous, we think by myself, but that doesn't really um, give the entire explanation of autonomous learner. So we will work on autonomy little by little, and part of this autonomy is reading the references. So when I was looking at the first problem, it says that Aminatou and Octaviani stated that to master English language, students can not only learn English from what is learned in the classroom given by the teacher. They need to explore many things to support their understanding about language. Therefore, independent learning skills is crucially needed. The students are the one who knows what they need to study according to their priority. However, sometimes it is hard for students to build their interdependent learning skill, since there is no encouragement from the teacher to promote it. And also students' lack of awareness related to what they are learning. So yes, in this case, the student wants to learn, he knows what he needs to learn, yet he's unsure. And that uncertainty might take my student to another side, something that I wouldn't recommend for him to learn, or maybe he would step in a different way. So in reference to the first problem that we see there, who would like to give a little reflection, or your opinion, or what do you think, a broader perspective of this particular problem may be?
Well, I do agree that learning a foreign language is not enough with what we do inside the classroom. If we take it from a public school situation, it's just 3 to 4 hours a week, and that's not enough. That's not enough time for practice. Maybe there are too many students, so students need to practice outside of it. They need to do outside the classroom activities. They need to look for strategies where they take what they learned in the class and use it outside of it. Of course, teachers need to model that. We need to give them the materials, or at least direct them towards the right way to do it. But that's where autonomy comes. They need to be able to organize their time. They need to be able to look for materials they're interested and related with, and actually use what they just learned in the class. It is obvious that they need to do it. If they don't, then mm, they won't advance as fast as they should. At least that's what I've seen in my experience working in different spaces. And this is also Benson in one of his articles mentioned that autonomy is seen when a student is able to decide what they need to continue learning and what they need based on that monitoring and self-reflection process they do. If they are doing that, then they are able to recognize what they need to do to keep improving, and whether it is in their reading skill, their listening skill, speaking, any of it. If they are actually autonomous, then they will be able to identify what they need to do outside the classroom and look for materials and resources to practice.
Good. Yes, definitely. We do play a very important role in these steps that the students have to take. And the students need to be aware of the need of a teacher. is some students think that they can learn by themselves. And yes, we can. But if we have a guide, it is much better. It is more accurate. So it will make your experience, your learning experience, a more gratifying one. So when we think about, I'm sorry, I got lost here for a minute, about student agency, and that is something I would like to talk to you today. Student agency is something that we don't talk too much about, and we need to promote student agency in and out of the classroom. This ability that the students need to have to be able to move forward in their learning process. Hang on one second. Fernando says something over here. According to the problem identified, Amitanun and Octaviani, the traditional classroom attendance is not enough to truly master the English language. It must be considered that the students need learning independently to strengthen what they get from teachers. To learn a language requires continuous immersion to exercise wider the classroom plays. Yeah, you need to, what Adriana was saying, Fernando is remarking as well, we do need to continuously practice outside of the classroom or outside of the learning space, especially when we are learning a foreign language. And if we don't get immersed in it, we will have more difficulty. So it really depends on the needs of the student. If the student needs to learn faster, of course, he's going to need more immersion and more agency to be able to choose and pick what he needs, which strategies work better for him, because his agency will be able to help him to take those decisions that will guide his learning process. So when we talk about, student agency weaknesses, which is just the analysis from Alpha East, shows that a significant portion of the students exhibit low levels of personal agency across four key dimensions. These weaknesses, such as dependency on friends or the lack of self-evaluation, are major obstacles to becoming autonomous learners. So when we talk about agency, that is something that we need to promote on our students. How do we promote, teach, or how do we take an endeavor if we are not good at it? Well, we need to become good at it as well. We need to become good agents of our learning process. I know that we take our time, we probably have a calendar, and we say, well, I'm going to study this today, this tomorrow, I'll do this the next day. And according to the authors, that is the process that you need to follow. However, some students, especially younger, don't manage time adequately. So that is something that also is learned. So agency doesn't just come naturally, is something that we need to also learn. And thinking about the self-regulating cycle, if we think about the self-regulating cycle, let me show you my screen 1 second. ¿Dónde estás? Here it is. Aquí. I'm sorry if you hear snoring, it's my dog. There ain't nobody falling asleep. Está. All right, so here I have the framework for a solution. So to counter these weaknesses that we were talking about, we can talk about the self-regulated learning. This model that was given to us by Johnson and Davis in 2014 described it is a cycle or a cyclical process where the learners actively manage their own learning. They hover over each stage to understand its role. So which are these different stages? These stages are important that we continue keeping them present because they will accompany us throughout the different units that we are going to continue working on. So the first thing is comprehension. The students need to comprehend the task, the requirements, their learning environment. They need to have access to the materials to be able to seek for clarification. So the feedback is very important from the professors. The second stage will be planning, where the learner develops a plan to tackle a specific task. These we might think about learning objectives, we might think about personal goals for learning a language, we may think of availability on time or specific resources that the student may have. Strategizing, we have to be strategic learners to be able to select and implement what works to achieve a learning purpose. We can use anything that is out there. There are many things online that we could use. However, we need to be focused on using what is good for my purpose, that serves a pedagogical purpose on my learning journey. So that is something that we need to keep in mind. Finally, evaluating. So when we evaluate and monitor the progress, we are able to clarify if those steps that I have taken are good, are not taking me towards my goal. In a sense, this is where metacognition starts working. When my student starts thinking about what he's learning and with the purpose, why am I learning? He's not thinking only the what, the how, but he's also thinking the why. So when the student is doing this metacognitive process and he's going around this circle, comprehension, planning, strategizing, and evaluating, he's also gathering those metacognitive abilities to take him to his learning purpose, right? Because every learner, as we see it, has a different purpose. Yes, we have students in high school that they need to comply with, according to the Ministry of Education, they need to comply with a B1, la, 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 la. Yet they don't. They come out at 11th grade and they're not barely an A1 level. You know, it happens in Colombia all the time. That's the true sadness of our scenario, but that's what it is. However, if we have another scenario, if I look at you, you are probably professors already, you are teachers, you know, on a day-to-day basis, and you as an autonomous learner also need to look at this cycle and see if this self-regulating cycle is working for you. Are you comprehending what you have to do? How are you planning to tackle that? Which strategies are you going to use? And finally, evaluate. When you go through this, you will be able to relate this to your students. Remember that we cannot teach that we don't have. So my recommendation is always to you to keep in mind that we need to continuously learn and be effective learners. So if we self-assess continuously, we will be make better choices as time goes by, so that this metacognitive loop is vital for success when we are talking about autonomy in learning. Okay, so this loop, we need to keep it very close. And as I was looking here at the other problem, this one, let's take a look at problem number 3. So here we have the learning beliefs, and I do recommend these readings here, these references for each problem are not mandatory, but I do recommend them because they are very insightful and they will help you understand everything in a much easier manner, because the reading is soft. It's not a very difficult reading. So you'll be able to gather examples from there. The third problem sits on, hang on a second. I lost the page. Here it is. The third problem sits on lie. The author Lai or Lay, I'm not sure, 2019, stated that out of class exposure to and use of the target language mediated by technological resources are essential to language learning, as foreign language learners very often encounter difficulty in accessing and processing the target language in the immediate physical environments. A contextualized and systemic approach is necessary to support foreign language learners' autonomous technology enhance language learning beyond the classroom. So right here, we have something that nowadays, this out of class exposure, how do we get exposure? How do we get immersion if we are out of the class? If we live in a Spanish environment. So here, this new author is showing us his research, and Fernando is telling us something here. I'm going to read it aloud because we can't hear his voice tonight. But for the second web conference, I hope you fix that mic. Lai emphasizes in his research that the lack of natural environments for developing basic language skills outside the classroom requires a reflective approach to pedagogy that considers the systematic use of technology and as enriching and easily accessible learning space that gives students the skills to develop their own language development. So, as the author mentions, he is ruling or he's going forward with technology, saying that these technologies out there will help students to have a more contextualized approach to learning foreign languages, which I agree, but I want to listen to you. So, Julian, what do you think about that? About that problem number 3 on the guide that we just talked about technology?
Okay, so I also agree with that. Currently, I'm working in an institute in which we use technology in order to maybe break those branches that we have in order to communicate each other. Because what you mentioned, we live in a context in which we talk Spanish everywhere, but we can use the technology in order to make or give the students that immersion that we need to have in another language. But what is the difficult here is that outside the classroom, for them is sometimes too hard to get the same access to the same technology. So I agree with that, but maybe outside the classroom, it's going to be, maybe we are going to need to plan, maybe not the to they give them very well explain maybe the resources in order they have yes the access to it and not get like something uncompleted.
Okay, so when we use technology, we can make their lives easier, make them have a more realistic approach to the language learning. Welcome, Alex Bernal and Adriana. What do you think?
I agree with Julian. It is evident that nowadays technology has become a really important and necessary tool or resource within our classes and within the foreign language learning process. As a clear example is our students in the bachelor program here at UNAT. Without technology, we wouldn't be able to teach them and practice with them the language. But I think it is important for students to learn how to properly interact with such technology, especially when it comes to teenagers or students who are at high school level still. Can you give me a second? I closed my window. Sorry.
No problem. So welcome, Alex. I'm sorry that you came in a little late, but at least you're here. So it's good. You can watch the recording. I can't hear you. You can open your mic.
No, that I was saying that I'm sorry that I was having some trouble with my internet, and
Okay.
I worked until 6, so I just was like very running to come here, but unfortunately, I just came late.
Okay,
But thank
don't
you.
worry. You can watch the recording. The recording will be posted today in campus, so you can look at it. Go ahead, continue, Adriana.
Okay, can you hear me well?
Yes.
It started raining. Sorry. Okay. So as I was saying, I think we need to be careful with the way with the way students interact with technology. They tend to focus lose their focus or lose their concentration. They tend to go just to social media or to use it just for their personal benefit or superficial activities. And that's when autonomy comes. They need to be able to decide how to use such technological resources properly and within their learning process. It's not just about watching a video or watching a movie. How you actually implement that within your learning process, what advantage you take out of it, and how you do it, how you evaluate it with it. It's something that I see a lot within the bachelor's program at UNAD. Students think that just because they're watching a video or just because they're listening to music, or that's enough. But it is not. You need to do a whole process behind it in order to be able to be productive and to actually uh, get some advantage and some benefits from it. So, of course, technology is great, but we need to help students to understand how to use it properly.
Correct. Especially nowadays with artificial intelligence, that everything and anything is out there. We are able to gather many useful things. However, we need to become a little bit of a curator, like these people at the museums, that they can choose what could be there with what purpose. Is it part of a collection? So particularly when we are going to invite our students to use technology, we need to guide them to which technology that is out there, and always with a learning objective or a pedagogical purpose. So we cannot move away from autonomy, looking at it from the eyes of a learner. We are teachers. We are studying to become specialized in a particular matter. But because if my student is autonomous and I can also uh, enrich that part of his learning process, my objective will be reachable faster if my student becomes autonomous properly. So I will be able to help them better. So to finalize today, I wanted to just share something with you guys. One moment, and here it is. So to these key takeaways that I have right here from these these key takeaways that I have right here from the different readings and the articles that we saw. The first thing is that, we do need this motivation boost. Just there are some points and some systems that need to be given to our students so that they get engaged with these classroom activities, but outside the learning environment per se. We need to foster these independent learning habits on our students through curating, like I was mentioning, these strategies or activities that they may have or they may get done. It's also important to look for effective learning. Um, when we think of students, 100% of students, they agree that this app, looking at the um, Mesmerize app, the other article, that 100% of students, they agree that the app helped them learn English and improve their vocabulary. When we talk to students that use language learning apps, they all say that they improve vocabulary. So which purpose, like, let's think about Duolingo, let's think about Beehive, that teach English, these apps. Most of the students that use these apps, they are cultivating their learning habits, and they need to be guided into just what for. So they already know what they want to learn. In this case, let's say they want to learn English. They know that they are going to learn it, how they are going to go into this app, and the why. Well, that is that metacognitive process that they need to do, and this learning loop that can never stop. And finally, our purpose is to foster autonomy. We need to foster autonomy by providing structure, but it needs to be somewhat flexible as well, because we need to support this self-regulated learning cycle. Remember that the self-regulated learning cycle starts with comprehension, planning, then it goes to strategizing, and finally evaluating. So when we do keep this in mind, let me stop right here. When we do keep this in mind, then we'll be able to aid our students towards autonomy. So it's also important that we keep a balance between liberty and autonomy. Autonomy does not mean absence of guidance or direction. Autonomy really means a balance between independence and support, which the purpose the purpose of this is to develop progress so that when our students are developing autonomous abilities, they can be cultivated gradually, little by little, inside and outside the classroom. So we need to combine these elements from self-regulated learning and self-directed learning as a whole experience so that the final objective can be for students that are able to have agency on their language learning, and they can also be independent with consistency, and when they need to find information or when they need help, they are able to seek for it, go beyond and not get just stuck looking for information. So I like to thank you for being here. I hope that this conversation was helpful, that it helped us through this first unit. We do have the second web conference already programmed. Let me just take a look at the calendar, and it's already on the initial environment. But I also would like to remind you, especially for those of you who are watching the video recording, that the attendance, it's very important that you are calling to be here and take part. And we are going to see each other again on the 23rd of September. 23rd of September, 7 to 8. So I think it's 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks from today. And I wish you all a good night. Thank you for being here. And the recording will be tonight on campus so that you can watch it or go back to it if you need to look into it. All right? Guys, have any
Okay,
questions?
thank you.
You're
Nope.
welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I did have a question about the work that we have to upload today, tomorrow, right?
Tomorrow, yeah.
Yes, because I was trying to upload it tonight, or I'm gonna do it tonight,
Okay.
but I was checking the course and it is not I don't know where because I couldn't find.
Go back to the evaluation environment, activity 1, and it's open until tomorrow,
Okay. Thank
where you
you.
would normally would do it. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Take care. Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Bye bye.
night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.